Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about using remote diagnostics with the Telguard TG-7FS. My name is Mitchell Olszewski, and I'm the Director of Marketing here. Kyle Harber is our product support specialist. Kyle comes from the industry, so he's got a lot of history with working with a variety of different panels and communicators. And today he's going to show us some of the best practices on how to support those communicators through our telguard.com. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you. Good morning, Kyle.
Good morning, everyone. As Mitchell just said, again, my name's Kyle Harber. I'm the product support specialist at Telguard. I've been a tech in the field. I started out in a call center, or I'm sorry, a monitoring center. And now I'm here at Telguard. So today, as Mitchell said, we're going to go over TG-7FS remote troubleshooting. And just to give you a breakdown of what we're going to cover today, this is all in regards to Telguard.com and how it can benefit you. So we're going to cover how to search a subscriber, how to get a status report, how to view and read that status report to understand the different troubles, what they mean. We're also going to touch a little bit on Linc Supervision and troubleshooting the unit overall.
And hey, Kyle, want to just quick housekeeping item here. Everyone that's joined is on listen only mode. So if you have a question, we do want this to be interactive. So use the control panel on GoToWebinar to send in a chat, and we can get those questions answered. So if don't be afraid to interrupt and send in those questions, and I'll share those with Kyle so he can answer those. So thanks, Kyle.
Of course. So first thing we're going to cover is just some basic stuff with Telguard.com. Logging in. So logging in, use your username and password, obviously. If you don't currently know your username or password or don't think you have one, either your office or your central station can assist you with setting one up if access to Telguard.com is something that they want to grant you. But once you get logged in, you're on the dealer profile page, or I'm sorry, you're within the dealer portal. So then you'll scroll down to the subscriber section. You can enter the serial number, the subscriber number, or the subscriber name in this section. And then you'll just click on the name and it'll open the subscriber profile. And then at that point, you can access just about everything for that specific unit within their profile. And then how to get a status report. So obviously we're talking about remote troubleshooting. So when it comes to getting a status report, there's multiple reasons why. Your STC zone or input relay from your Telguard is going to monitor your troubles on your Telguard and be hooked to a zone or an output on your panel, which we will then trip when one of our Telguard troubles or STC troubles occurs. And then we would send that event that zone or that output is programmed for within the panel to your central station. So at that point, you get the trouble signal, you're wondering what's going on with my unit, because typically that trouble signal is very broad. It's not very specific due to the fact that our STC relays monitor multiple troubles. So you get a trip of that output or that zone. The next step would be to come to Telguard.com and get a status report. The way you would do that is if you're on the subscriber profile under the details tab, you can then go to device details. Then it's going to automatically populate on the SelfTest tab. You'll go to the status tab, and then to the far right, you'll select get status. It'll give you a 4-minute timer, and then you'll get a prompt if it's successful. Now, if it's not successful, your 4-minute timer will expire, and then at that point, it will indicate that it was not able to reach the unit. We'll go over a little bit later how to proceed if you're not able to connect to the unit, but in this circumstance, we've connected to the unit, And then now we're going to view the report. So in order to view the report, after you've gotten that successful acknowledgement on your screen, you're going to select OK, and then it's going to auto-populate the list of status reports. So at that point, your newest report will populate, and under the creation date is where you would select to open the report. It takes a moment to open. Once the report's open, you can see anything and everything that's going on with the unit. It gives you the creation date, the issue, which in this case, it's a status report. The only other issue that you'll see within a status report is SelfTest. And then it breaks down what's going on with the unit after that. So the next slide is where we'll get into what exactly everything there means. So the result. In this particular report, you'll see that the result shows all okay. So that means there are no current troubles. If there were any current troubles, such as an AC failure condition or a line fault condition, so on and so forth, those abbreviations, such as ACFC for AC failure condition or LFC for line fault, would show up in the results section there. So you'd have either LFC, ACFC, RFC, or NSC. And that's only if it's an active trouble at the time of the report. The signal strength. The signal strength is indicated in bars. We have 1 bar to 4 bars. We also use color coding to help you understand if you have good quality signal, or if you're reaching the minimum requirement, or if you have poor signal. The way we dictate that is if you have good signal, like in this case with 3 bars, the color of the bars will be green. If you have 2 to 2.5 bars, which is adequate but not great, it'll be amber in color. And if you have 1 or 1.5 bars, which is poor, it'll be red in color. So the colors do kind of give you an idea of what you're working with without having to actually read the numbers. Now the mode of operation, the next step down. This is kind of important. So what this is going to indicate is the mode in which the unit is set up to communicate in. So if you have Linc Supervision and you're doing fire, most likely your unit is set up as a sole path communicator. So in that case, your mode is going to be cellular only. There are times where you have phone lines that you're connecting to the Telguard that are either going to be primary or backup to that cellular unit. And in those situations, depending on what configuration, you'll either set the TG-7FS to cellular primary if the phone line is plugged into the bottom gray port and is a backup option to cellular, or you'll set it up as cellular backup. And that would be the same wiring configuration where your POTS line is connected into the bottom gray port on the Telguard, but the Telguard's going to be a pass-through until we see 5 failed attempts over that POTS line, and then we'll swap over to cellular. Now moving into the troubles and what they are. So CFC, communications, failure conditions. So this is in regards to your phone line. So if you have a backup or a primary phone line and you fail to deliver over that line 5 times, it'll throw the unit into a communication failure condition, indicating that we're not able to communicate out over that POTS line on the at the location. So if that is the case, unfortunately, it requires a tech on site, but at least you know what the tech's looking for when he gets there. Then you have AC failure condition. So you'll notice with CFC, there's only one field, which is just 0, 0 currently. So that's the count. That's going to give you the total count of the number of events or number of times that particular event occurred since the last status report. So every trouble, we keep track of the count. The start of when we start counting is when you received your last status report, and then we stop counting at the time of your next status report. So if it's been 24 hours, you're going to see all the troubles over those 24 hours. If it's been 30 days, you're going to get the count for all 30 days. But other than CFC, all other troubles, we give you the count, and then we give you the date and the time. So where it says ACFC, this would be my count. It could be 1, it could be 0, it could be all the way up to 99. And then the time just below it is going to be the date and the time that the last AC failure condition occurred. So there could be 99 events there, but if the last one was 10 minutes prior to your status report, that's the date and the time that you're going to show there. And that same rule applies for all the troubles, whether it be AC failure, line fault condition, low battery condition, no service condition, or radio failure condition. And then we always provide you with the creation date and time, which is your local time and when you've requested status. The local time here at the bottom is going to be the time that the Telguard reads from the local network tower. So these two times could be different. If your office is in Denver, Colorado, but you happen to have units out in Oregon, as an example, you're going to show two different times there. Mine personally shows the same times because it's a test unit sitting right in front of me. So me and the unit are in the same time zone. Now, before we get into Linc Supervision, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to go into the chat and go ahead and ask some questions. That way we can break it up a little bit along the way. Of course, if you want to wait till the end, that's perfectly fine. But if you have anything along the way, we'll gladly answer it as we go. And that way we can just kind of keep things rolling.
Hey, Kyle, don't see anything yet, but I'll let you know if something comes up, and we'll open up for conversation at the end if we've got some time. So if you feel more comfortable just chatting.
Okay.
But right now I don't see any questions.
All right, sounds good. It is early. That always seems to be the trend with early training sessions, remote or in person. All right, so getting back into it, Linc Supervision, this is just a brief breakdown of Linc Supervision. If this is something you end up wanting more in depth, I just want to throw out there, we are offering these webinars for more specialized training. Anyways, so Linc Supervision, so the TCC or Telguard Communications Center monitors check-in signals as heartbeats for the TG-7FS. So I got a diagram in the next slide that I'm going to use to break down in that example 60-minute supervision, just so you kind of understand what those heartbeats are. But we do allow check-ins periodically to meet 5-minute or 60-minute requirements in the US, as well as 180 seconds for Canada if we have any Canadian dealers on the line. Now, these check-in signals, it's very important that you guys understand that they are transparent and non-interfering. So what this means is, if you have a fire alarm, that fire alarm is still going to deliver through even if we're actively checking in with the unit as that alarm occurs. So understand they can actually happen simultaneously, but if we have to take and make a preference between the two, the alarm signal will always be what gets sent through first. but again, it shouldn't interfere. They use two different portions of the data of the cellular network. And then Linc Supervision uses the data portion of the network, whereas normal signals use SMS. So for most people, to break that down so that it's understandable, the data portion would be the portion you use when you get on your smartphone and go on YouTube, where the SMS would be just like sending a standard text message to your best friend saying good morning. So that's how we're able to be non-interfering, because they're on two separate portions of the network. Now, just to give you a better understanding and a little bit of a breakdown as to what our Linc Supervision does. So understand this is for 60-minute supervision. 5-minute, the intervals are every 2.5 minutes, and then 180 seconds. We go about in the middle for anything 5 minutes or less in time, where 60-minute, we do 4 check-ins every 60 minutes. So our unit will send a data packet through the cell network to our TCC. So it'll leave here, hit the network, hit our TCC. We acknowledge the response and we're good for 15 minutes. Now 15 minutes later, the unit will do the same. Now, the unit's working fine, it's checking in. So it checks in at, let's say, 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and then it stops checking in. Well, because we had a successful check-in at 1 p.m., at 1:15, it failed to check in. So at that point, our timer has started. We're already on the clock for 15 minutes, and we're going to count up to 60. So in 45 minutes at that point, if we have not received another data packet to check in, the unit will go into a loss of central polling. Now, it is key to note that a loss of central polling on the TG-7FS will be specified as an RFC, or radio failure condition. So yes, you will get a loss of central polling signal to your central station, but your STC relay will also be triggered by the Telguard for an RFC. When that happens, it should trigger your zone on your panel and you'll get local notification. As well, when that RFC occurs, you'll lose voltage and dial tone on the panel. So that'll be your local annunciation as well, that the panel's no longer online. But that's just a basic breakdown for you. But yes, so we monitor it, and then our back end, based off of what we're receiving from the unit, we can send failures or restorals to central station. Now, getting into self-test and what exactly a self-test is and what it can do for you. So a self-test can be found on telguard.com under the device details tab. It's the first tab that's going to automatically populate. But a self-test can validate connectivity to the network in real time. So when you go and you run that self-test, what we're doing is our backend, or our TCC, is going to send out a message to the unit. The unit's going to respond, or it's not going to respond. If it responds, that means we passed the test. It will send something back to our communication center, and then we forward a pass signal through to central station. If for some reason it failed to connect, at that point we get no response within, we typically give it 4 minutes. If that 4-minute time frame expires, we then send a failure to central station. And that's how you can check real time your connectivity. But it also validates the connection between the Telguard and our communication center. So it will make sure that the unit is able to send signals to us, and then it'll also validate that we can forward them through to your central station. What it does not validate is anything with panel connectivity. So understand that this is just the unit communicating with our back end. So there is nothing that involves the panel with this process. So if for some reason, which it's not likely, but if the panel did become disconnected and that's why it was not communicating, a self-test would not unfortunately help you understand that any better. Now we can send default event codes or custom event codes. So as the techs on the line know, maybe not anyone that's in the office, but the techs know, at least in most cases, that there are default codes that have certain meanings for each format. So there are default test event codes that we can work with, or you can use custom event codes. So some central stations want to use codes that are a little bit different than just the standard codes. So we are capable of working around and making that happen. Now, as far as the self-test for the TG-7FS goes, because there are a lot of requirements for fire, with the TG-7FS, we have a 6-hour test. So every 6 hours, we would test the unit. So 4 times a day. We have a daily test, which is pretty standard on a TG-7FS if you have Linc Supervision. Then we have a weekly test and a monthly test. So weekly and monthly are more so going to apply towards our residential units, but if your AHJ allows you to get away with a plan that might be a little bit cheaper due to less number of check-ins, then you're welcome to go for it. And you can also customize the time of the test. So just keep in mind, if for some reason a test is coming through at a time that just isn't what you would like, or it failed and you want to retry it because maybe you went and requested status and got a status report. So then you can go in and you can change the time to 10 minutes from now or 15 and have it run another self-test and see if it passes. I just want to remind everybody again, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them through over on the chat, and we can answer them as we go, or again, you can wait till the end and we'll unmute everybody and allow more of a conversation platform with Q&A at the end as well. Now, troubleshooting. So let's say you have a TG-7FS at a site, and every day or every other day, or maybe a couple of times a day, maybe they have construction going on at the site, because that's a very real scenario. And these guys are overwhelming the circuit board, the breaker box, and are tripping some of the breakers. So the panel keeps powering down, and in this case, an AC failure condition keeps happening on our TG-7FS. So in that circumstance, if we don't have a delay on our AC failure condition, it's going to trip the panel and send through every time they trip that breaker box. Well, as you guys know, and as well as I know, the customer doesn't want to be called every time when they know what's going on because construction's happening on site. Or you're just, you've accidentally dispatched because you can't get a hold of them, created a fine, now they're just belligerent. Because we all know those things happen. So in that case, I can actually adjust the delay of the AC failure condition. Now understand our default setting is 2 hours, but sometimes things get altered within templates that change it to either no delay or a very limited amount. Now, you can go into the device settings section on Telguard.com, which once you log in, once you pull up the subscriber, once you open the subscriber, you're going to automatically end up on the subscriber details page. And at that point, you just scroll down to the device settings, hit the edit button, and at that point, you'll be able to adjust. You can adjust the number of attempts before a CFC happens or communication failure. You can adjust the delay on a no service condition. So maybe they have a generator that's 5 feet away from the Telguard and it's a big one, and every 24 hours it kicks on and does a 5-minute test, or not even a 5-minute, let's just say it kicks on for 60 seconds. And it creates just enough interference somehow to knock the Telguard offline for, let's say, 1 minute and 10 seconds. So our default setting for the no service condition for our Telguards is 60 seconds. That delay can be adjusted. It can be shortened. It can be extended. So we have 30 seconds that it could go down to. It can do 1 minute. It can do 3 minutes. And then beyond that's a little questionable, but you can extend that delay if it's something that continuously is happening on the site, but is outside of your control and is not something that you can reprogram or reconfigure to resolve as far as in a hardware sense. So you can go and extend the delays and that'll resolve a lot of those issues. As well, I should add under this tab, my apologies, this is where you can adjust what troubles are on relay 1 and what troubles are on relay 2. So this relay is our STC relay, or system trouble condition relay. So our relay 1 is most commonly used for fire because it is a normally open relay. Relay 2 is still used, but less commonly for fire because it is a normally closed relay. So as you know, if it's a normally closed relay, we would need a normally closed output or zone to connect it to. Anyone that installs fire, typically we know that fire is normally open. Now, just to give you a broader or a greater detailed definition of all the troubles, just so you understand what you're looking at in your status report and how to proceed appropriately. We're going to break each one of these down a little more after this, but just to give you a quick run through, AC failure condition. This is where the AC power source drops below an acceptable level. If you're using our 12 volt 0.8 amp hour transformer, you should never have AC power issues unless that transformer gets blown or the outlet is no longer producing the 120 volts it normally does. Low battery condition, pretty straightforward. This is the Telguard's battery. So sometimes there's confusion as to if this is the panel's battery or the Telguard's battery. We do not monitor the panel's battery. That is done by the panel itself. So if you get a low battery condition on a Telguard, this is going to be the Telguard's battery is low. Line fault condition, this is where we're not seeing the proper voltage on the bottom grade RJ jack on the TG-7FS. This only applies to cell primary or cell backup modes. If you are doing sole path cellular only, then this will not apply to you and you will only see this trouble condition before the unit gets activated. No service condition. This one's straightforward across the board with all our units. It's just not able to connect to the cellular network. So we'll touch on that more in a minute and how you can troubleshoot it. Now, an RFC is when the Telguard is unable to transmit, even though there is an acceptable connection to the cellular network. So by acceptable connection, we have signal strength. At that point, you should be able to transmit over the network. Whether you have 1.5 bars or 4 bars of service, it should still work. It's just going to come down to reliability if we're talking about 1.5 bars. Now, control failure to communicate, or it can also be referred to as communication failure. Oh, I'm sorry. This is where the Telguard monitors the number of communication attempts the alarm panel makes over the telco or POTS line, or plain old telephone service, before taking over. So we actually monitor the number of attempts for one signal that go through the phone line. If we're not able to get it to successfully send through after the default 5 attempts, it will go into a CFC. And then panel presence failure. So this is where the Telguard does not detect a connection to the panel. This one I'll briefly touch. We really don't go into too much depth. It's not required. This is something that you're going to provide tip and ring voltage to the panel. Then you're going to hook up your returns for your tip and ring. And those returns are going to return the voltage to the Telguard, and that's how we know there's a valid connection between the panel and the Telguard. Now, getting a little more detailed with each trouble condition and how to work with it. So a AC failure condition, the AC's dropped. So we work with the provided transformer that's 12 volts, 0.8 amp hours. I think it's safe to say that most of you would be aware that this would require a tech on site to resolve this issue. Unfortunately, an AC failure issue is not something that can be resolved remotely. This is going to be a hardware issue. Now, low battery condition. This is where we're reading less than 9 volts on the backup battery on the TG7. Just to make sure I specify, again, this is referring to the Telguard's battery. So any troubles the Telguard creates is referring to the Telguard. We have a lot of confusion at times with those low battery signals on whether it's the panel or the Telguard. So I just want to specify. And then again, a low battery condition, we can't charge the battery remotely, unfortunately. Obviously, the TG-7FS does tend the battery. So if it is reading low, you can give it time and see if it charges it back up to spec. But if it doesn't, unfortunately, at that point, you're gonna have to send the tech out to the site because it's a low battery condition, and if the battery's not gonna recharge to an acceptable amount, then it has to be replaced. Now, line fault condition. So this is where the telco line voltage being monitored by the Telguard drops below the acceptable amount. My apologies on the typo there. So this is where the voltage drops below 28 on the bottom gray port of the Telguard. This is for the POTS line, or plain old telephone service, that we're monitoring that's connected to the Telguard. This is only going to apply when the Telguard's in a cell primary or cell backup state. Cell only state, it will not apply because, again, we're not looking for that voltage in a cell only state. So if this happens, it most commonly comes up when the telephone service provider at a business has changed and the wiring configuration is no longer the same. So that's the most common for a long-term LFC. Obviously, it can happen in other capacities, such as if it's not backfed properly and they go to make a phone call, it can throw the panel into an LFC. So there are multiple causes or multiple things that can create it. If it is happening, there's a couple ways around it. You can change the mode that the unit's configured for if you're not able to get out to the site, or it requires a technician on site to resolve the issue. Now, no service condition, straightforward. It's when the Telguard is unable to connect to the cellular network. So if you can get a status from this from the unit currently, meaning, okay, I see there was a trouble condition last night. I request a status. I get a status report. In that report, I see a no service condition, but we're at 2.5 bars or better in our signal strength. At that point, we have a couple of options on how we want to proceed. So as I told you earlier, we can adjust the delay, which by extending it. So if we registered no connection to the cell network, we have to maintain that state. In the default settings, it's set at 60 seconds. So we would have to disconnect from the network for 60 seconds before the Telguard then reacts to drop voltage, drop dial tone, and then generate a no service condition through the STC relay. So you can extend that delay. Maybe the unit's showing no service condition 10 times a day, and you're looking at the time it's reported versus the time that you're seeing in the status report, and that'll tell you how long it was down. So if you're seeing that it's consistently down maybe 1 minute and 15 seconds every time it goes down, some of our dealers are okay with extending that delay to 3 minutes. Now, I understand if that issue's occurring, you want to figure out what's going on and resolve it. Myself and tech support are glad to assist there. But in those circumstances where you need something on the fly until you can get a tech on site so that the customer doesn't get irritated, because we know it's all about the customer, the end user, because that's where y'all make all your money. So you got to keep them happy. This would be a way as a temporary solution until you can get someone on site to get that issue resolved. Now, if you can't connect to the unit remotely, at that point, you are welcome to contact tech support. So we do have the capabilities of going into the network and trying to go, instead of from the unit to us through the network, we can actually access the network in a way to where we can go from the network tower to the unit. And so we do have ways where we could potentially bring a unit online before you rush to send someone out. So just throwing that out there as a viable option. But of course, if we're not able to connect and we're not able to get things up and running, at that point, you're gonna have to send a tech on site. Now, radio failure condition. So this is when a unit has adequate signal strength, but is not able to successfully communicate. The most common cause with a TG-7FS for an RFC is typically an issue with Linc Supervision. So if Linc Supervision is set for sole path and the unit fails to check in after either 5 minutes, 60 minutes, or 180 seconds, at that point, it would create an RFC on the unit. It would generate a loss of central polling to your central station. And then once the signal restores and the Telguard's able to dial out, your panel will restore from the troubles, and the STC trouble will then all be relayed through the Telguard to your central station. So on this unit, that is typically the case for an RFC. Interference could also cause an RFC, but if you have interference on a Linc supervised unit, you're going to end up failing the supervision. So it's going to boil down to the RFC being because the supervision failed. And you can also get an RFC if it's a new install and your panel and Telguard aren't handshaking and kissing off properly. So that's really your three causes for an RFC, but the main one to worry about with a SolPath TG-7FS would be for Linc Supervision. Now, control failure to communicate or communication failure condition. This is where the Telguard monitors the number of communication attempts the alarm panel makes over the telco before taking over. So this applies again in a cellular backup or a cellular primary state where we have a POTS line connected into our bottom gray port, and we are being a pass-through where we are allowing the phone line to pass through our Telguard to the panel, and the panel to pass through the phone line, pass through the Telguard to the POTS line. I said when it's set up as a cell backup, so typically it's going to be when it's set as a cell backup, because if it is set as a cell primary, unless the cellular fails, you'll never get to the POTS or the telco line. And then you can adjust the number of attempts before it goes into the CFC under the device settings tab, like we went over a little earlier. So you can actually go in and raise or lower that number so that it either happens quicker or you're able to get more attempts out before you go into CFC. And then PPF or panel presence failure. So this is where the Telguard doesn't detect a connection to the panel. This is monitored through the tip and ring, which the Telguard supplies 30 volts to the panel through the tip and ring. And then the tip and ring return from the panel's end, those return connections will return that 30 volts to the Telguard. So when the voltage is lost, meaning the panel could still be getting 30 volts, but if there's not 30 volts coming back to the Telguard on the return for the tip and ring, the PPF will occur at that point. So typically that's going to be a connection or a wiring issue, but something more of a hardware thing. If the unit's been up and working and then all of a sudden a PPF happens, it could actually be where someone broke into the location and decided to cut the RJ cord between the panel and the Telguard, because that is a way that you can cause a PPF, and that's essentially how it's designed to work. Now, just to give you a breakdown of the terminology we went over, just so everyone understands, in case there's any lingering questions from, oh, what did this phrase mean, or so on and so forth. TCC is Telguard Communication Center. This is commonly by myself and by tech support referred to as our back end. So if we're saying our back end, we're probably talking about the communication center that we have at Telguard, and we're probably pulling some data from it or looking at some data from it. Now telco, again, plain old telephone service. I think this is pretty standard across the industry, but just wanted to make sure I covered that. Mode of operation. So we have 3 modes that we work with. The reason I cover this is because there always seems to be a little miscommunication at first when we get new dealers. And that is understanding the difference between cell primary and cell only. A lot of people will have a unit that's doing SolPath and they will set it up as cell primary because the cellular is the primary and in some cases only means of communication. Well, Primary in our sense, we're looking for a phone line to be connected to the bottom gray port. So if we're not picking up the voltage of that phone line, we're going to create an LFC or line fault condition. So it's very important to understand if you should be in primary backup or cell only. Cell only, if you're doing sole path and you're enabling supervision, is going to be the mode of operation that you're going to use.
Hey, Kyle, got a
Yes, sir.
question here for you if this is a good stopping point.
Okay.
I had one here that says, if a salesperson is doing a site survey, is there a way for them to get an idea of signal strength for the SMS before a tech goes out to install a TG7?
That is a very good question. So there's a couple ways you can go about it. The ways in which you can go about it are a TG1 Express powered off of a battery, an AT&T TG1 Express. You don't even have to register. You can literally power it up off a battery and you can walk the site, and it should give you a pretty accurate reading of what the signal strength is going to be. And a TG1 and a TG7 should be very similar as far as signal strength, and by very similar, within negative 3 to 5 dBms. If you have a Verizon or you want to test Verizon at a location, our units do require being registered, but they do not require being activated. So there's no fee to register a unit. It's only if you activate the unit. If you go and you register a TG1 Express that's a Verizon, you can then go and power it up off of battery and walk the site with it as well, and it will give you a pretty accurate reading on what your signal strength is that way. The other route, if you don't want to buy a TG1 Express, which just for that purpose, which is understandable, you can actually use your cell phone, but do not use the bar readout. That is where there's a lot of confusion, because your cell phone, more likely than not, will take a negative 103 dBm reading and it'll show up as 4 bars on your cell phone. On our Telguard, a negative 104 dBm reading is going to show anywhere from 1.5 bars to 2 bars. So there's a substantial difference there. The way in which you can use your phone, depending on if it's Verizon or AT&T, those are the two that we use. Obviously, if you have AT&T as your plan, you're only going to be able to read AT&T service, or vice versa with Verizon. But you can actually go into your phone settings, if you have an Android, and go to About Phone and then Network Settings, and you'll actually be able to get your dBm reading on your phone, and it'll tell you what the dBm is. So if you're under negative 100 dBm, we will work with no problem. If you're over negative 100, or maybe I should have said that the other way. If you're at negative 100, negative 101, and continuing that direction, it's poor quality signal strength. If you're at negative 100, negative 99, or continuing in that direction, you're inadequate or good cell coverage. So that is a alternate method as well, just to throw that out there. I think that answers that question. Are there any other questions as of right now?
I don't see any other questions right now, but thank you, Kyle.
Of course. And then just the last thing in the terminology, the self-test. This is where our backend, or our TCC, sends a message to the unit, and the unit either responds or does not within a 4-minute window. And at that point, based off the result, we forward through to central station either a failure for that self-test or a passed self-test. And